What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Bayverse Bulletin, a web series where I talk about everything relating to Michael Bay's next live-action Transformers movie. I'm your host, Theorymus, also known as Jason, and as we all know, it has been reported that Michael Bay, the man himself who brought Transformers to the big screen, is coming back to make another live-action Transformers movie, either as a director or as a hands-on producer. And it's more likely to be a director this time around. And we'll get into that news a little later. Now, you might be wondering, since I'm like one of the major Bayverse content creators on YouTube, why I did not cover this when it came out. Well, that's because I was actually in Hawaii with the family. I got to see a lot of cool things. So I literally woke up one day in a hotel room and I heard the news. I couldn't believe it because, like, Bay coming back really after, it's been 10 years I've been hoping for this ever since the last night to get a conclusion in that film. And, I was starting to lose some hope, but I was in the back of my mind. I felt, I feel like Paramount's eventually going to have to bust out the Bay card, and here we are. So we're going to basically talking about Bay's return, what it means, why he's returning, and the they count them five, projects, Transformers projects that are in development. And I wouldn't be too excited about, five because, when we had Rise of the Beast and The Last Night, 3 separate scripts were turned into those films. So 3 potential projects turned into one. So we'll dive more into that. So let's start off with the big news. Michael Bay coming back. And, love him or hate him, and I especially love the guy. I think he has done a fantastic job handling Transformers franchise, in my opinion. Because I grew up with the Bayverse, so that's my G1, that's my reference point. And I am a diehard fan of his original trilogy. I thought Age of Extinction was okay. And The Last Night was, it's The Last Night. Not the biggest fan. There was a handful of things I liked about it, but kind of just threw continuity out the window, and, it was bad. Let's just put it like that. It wasn't the best of his work. And basically, with his journey, he'd always say he wouldn't come back to do another film. And of course he would do it. But after he said that for The Last Night, we didn't see him for 10 years. So basically, what has been reported, and I have my notes right here, is that Bay himself approached Paramount to pitch a new Transformers movie to them, and this was apparently happened last year. And he was offering to act as a hands-on producer and possibly direct it himself. Now, at face value, that sounds great, but that's actually really interesting news, because as we know with Bay, when it comes to his Transformers movies, he hasn't always been as passionate with each installment. So to start off with the first Transformers movie, 2007, Transformers '07, awesome movie. In that film, when Bay was brought on, he originally wasn't convinced. He didn't want to do a toy movie, but until he saw some pieces of artwork and actually went to Transformers school at Hasbro, which is a real thing when they were trying to, make a Transformers live action project, he got involved, and his whole stick was trying to make the franchise feel real for people who never even heard about it, which is why it looked completely different from the cartoons that came before. And, it's actually something that's not really widely reported, but is actually mentioned in the director's commentary for Transformers 2007, is that Bay did not know if the 2007 film would actually be a success. And, well, lo and behold, it did, and therefore it speed ramped him to doing Revenge of the Fallen. Now, when it came to Revenge of the Fallen, it was basically all about spectacle. A lot of people were requesting to see more robots, more action, and that's what they focused over his story. And considering that movie was produced during the Writers Guild strike, there was a lot of complications on set that basically hindered Revenge of the Fallen from meeting its full potential. And despite, the constraints they had, I thought they still did an okay. It's definitely the weakest of the trilogy, but considering what they were up against, they did the best they could. And because of this at the time, Bay wasn't sure if he wanted to really do Transformers 3, which is Dark of the Moon, but he kind of came around to the idea, realizing because he originally wanted to do like a movie in between the two, and so he could basically do like a passion project, right? But he realized that he might lose some key crew when doing that third film, from doing his passion project in between the third film. So then he realized, he wants to keep the crew because they worked on the past 2 films, so they know how to keep up with him and how he directs these massive movies that not too many directors can figure out, because he was the one who basically had to figure out how you actually shoot these things on set that aren't actually there. And so Dark of the Moon was made, and I personally think it's the best of the trilogy. I actually have a clapperboard, the things where they like, put it in front of the camera, have the takes for Dark of the Moon right there. I'll put it up on screen in a better image. It's definitely my favorite out of the trilogy, and I, honest to God, believe it. And, you call me biased, but I think it's the best action movie ever made, especially if you look into how the film was made, the practical stunts, and it's definitely the best work that ILM has ever did for the Transformers pentology, in my opinion. So yeah, I think it's by far the best action movie ever made, but that's just me. But after Dark of the Moon, Bay said he was done. This was basically the end of the trilogy. The whole goal of Dark of the Moon was to make a ending, and thus that was supposed to cap off the trilogy. There wasn't supposed to be a Transformers 4. However, as the story goes, he actually saw the Transformers ride at Universal, saw how the line wrapped around the building, and he couldn't really stomach the thought that someone else could take on the franchise and make a fourth installment instead of him. However, he wasn't really fully convinced, but because he wanted to do a passion project at the time. And so Paramount said, well, we'll let you do the passion project, which was Pain and Gang, which was with Mark Wahlberg. And in return, he would have to make Transformers 4 for them. And because of him doing Pain and Gain, that's how we got Transformers 4, and we also got Mark Wahlberg, who was in that movie that come to Age of Extinction, which is interesting because originally it was supposed to be The Rock, which would have been a completely different timeline, but since he was doing Baywatch at the time, we didn't get The Rock. So it would have been a very interesting timeline if we got The Rock over Wahlberg, but, chew on that. So then after Age of Extinction, made another $1 billion after Dark of the Moon did. A little less, but, I think Dark of the Moon was $1.2 billion, Age of Extinction was 1.1. It's been reported that Bay wasn't too sure if he wanted to do the fifth film, but we don't have too much information in, but as we know, we got roped in. It's probably due to a contract, and as you guys know, we had the whole writer's room, and it just felt like compared to his other work, especially compared to Dark of the Moon, he didn't seem to have the same spark that he did. So him actually coming to this project on his own terms is actually really good news because it shows that he's interested. And therefore, we will, if this goes through, which it likely is, we're going to get definitely a better product than The Last Night. Especially, nothing can be worse than The Last Night. So yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to. Now, the film actually does have a writer attached. His name is Jordan VanDina. And he's written a handful of things for films, and he's not too terribly well known to my knowledge. However, on his Instagram, he's actually been reposting Screen Rant articles talking about Michael Bay returning to the franchise. So we have a writer attached, we have Bay clearly having interest to return, and he actually brought this script that VanDina did for his pitch, so there's already allegedly some script or treatment for this movie, and Bay's interested. So that's where we are with that, and that's really exciting news, because if Bay's interested in doing something, he's going to put his best foot forward. So I'm looking forward to what this will be. Now, when we take a look at the other projects that were mentioned, because there were 5 Transformers projects that were claimed to also be in production. Now, I would say this is a farce because we heard this with the writer's room. The writer's room, as you guys probably know, is during Age of Extinction to The Last Night. They got a whole lot of writers together to plan out the next 10 years of Transformers movies. And Bumblebee movie came out of that. Transformers 1 actually came out of that. It would have been a prequel to the Bayverse before getting reimagined. And that was, I believe, announced all the way back in 2015. And we just got that movie, I think, in last year. Yeah, 2024. So, a lot of these movies have been, a lot of the ideas from the writer's room are still being made, but in a completely different way that are not really attached to the Bayverse. Because Rise of the Beasts was apparently supposed to be, to my knowledge, a Beast Wars movie, which came out of the writer's room, an Optimus solo film, and a sequel to Bumblebee. They basically combined those 3 ideas, and that's how we got Rise of the Beasts, which I thought was an okay movie. Definitely better than The Last Night, in my opinion. But I wouldn't say it touched the levels of the original trilogy. I think I actually liked Age of Extinction a little bit more, because the first part of Age of Extinction is pretty fun. But The Last Night was also the same thing, okay? The Last Night was supposed to be a sequel to Age of Extinction. However, at the writer's room, they want to shoehorn in a World War II theme, and that was supposed to be a movie called Transformers Operation Skyfire. I'll put some concept art from it up on the screen. It's too bad we didn't get that film, because that would have been really cool to see. And another movie was also supposed to be Transformers Nights, which is why The Last Night had so much night influence. So basically 3 different projects were merged into one. So when you look at these 5 projects, you're like, okay, well, they might be 5 projects now, but they might all be, combined into one movie. So hopefully it doesn't do that, because The Last Night was a failure because of that, in my opinion, because you can't just set up a cinematic universe like that and put in 3 different ideas and expect a great outcome. And Rise of the Beast was okay. I felt like as a sequel to Bumblebee, it's just such a big jump. It's like starting with Iron Man to like Endgame with like all the characters and introducing the Beast Wars. They definitely have to build up more to that. So, and unfortunately they didn't, which is kind of why I didn't do as well. Now, what could these 5 projects be right now? Well, as we know, thanks to Rise of the Beast, the end credit scene showed the G.I. Joe live-action movie. And a lot of people have been speculating that Bay would do the live-action G.I. Joe movie because of his, background with the Pentagon and the military, it would be right up his alley. However, something I haven't seen anyone really notice is that, if you guys didn't know, trying to get G.I. Joe into Rise of the Beast had to be approved by Bay. And originally, Bay did not want to have G.I. Joe because he thought it would cheapen the 2 franchises. He wanted them to be separate, but after being called again, he eventually caved. And I'll put part of the article up on screen, to basically fact check what I'm saying here. So he didn't want to do G.I. Joe, allegedly. If it was up to him and they asked him the first time, he said no, and that's where it stayed. But because he kept on getting nagged, they let G.I. Joe in the movie, which is interesting because originally it was actually supposed to be shot with that card being Sector 7. So unfortunately, we got G.I. Joe, and that movie hasn't really seen any developments outside of Chris Hemsworth being cast, I believe is Duke, but we have no idea what the fate of that movie is, and I highly doubt that's going to be the next project. However, there are some other projects that this film might, or one of these 5 films might be. We know one of the 5 is probably going to be Bay's project with VanDina as the writer. Potentially G.I. Joe. Could be, but I highly doubt that. But then we also have Josh Cooley, who directed Transformers 1, which was an amazing film, and it definitely deserved a sequel. But because it didn't even make its production budget back, unfortunately, Paramount canned it, and we're not going to get a sequel to that film, but they're still going to bring back Josh Cooley for a live-action movie. So exactly how that's going to pan out is anyone's guess. I wonder what he's going to do, because I love Transformers 1. I thought it was really fun. Definitely, story-wise, I'd say it's definitely better than the Bay films, but I like the Bay films more, because that's what I grew up on, and nothing will touch Dark of the Moon for me, personally. So that's definitely one of the 3. So then this leaves 2 more. And, well, back in 2021, we did hear news of another Transformers film being in production. It was by, I hope I'm not butchering this, Angel Manuel Salto. So Angel Saltos, and he was basically the director of Blue Beetle. And for a while, we were hearing updates about it being a really small Transformers film that was separate from everything else and was like its own spin-off. And I think the latest development we heard on that movie was in 2024, but we haven't really heard anything from that. So that could be potentially the 4th movie out of these 5, and then the 5th one completely unknown. So what that leaves us potentially would be, my best bet would be Bay's movie, G.I. Joe, Josh Cooley's project, and maybe the movie that will be done by the Blue Beetle director. So that leaves 4. So the 5th one is a complete unknown. So, just because they say there's 5 projects in development doesn't mean we're going to get all 5. And honestly, some of these might just end up in development hell, like Transformers 1 was, from 2015, and then released all the way in 2024. So almost 10 years later. So just because a project might not come out now doesn't mean it won't come out later, because we've seen that. So some other news I want to touch on here in my notes would be another reason why Bay would want to come back. So Bay has directed, after The Last Night, he's been producer on all the Transformers films and a ton of other projects, but he's only directed 3 films since The Last Night. Those being 6 Underground, Ambulance, and a documentary, it's slipping my name, but it was a parkour documentary. I put the name of it on screen right now because I don't have it in the notes, unfortunately. But yeah, so basically he directed 3 things since 2017, which is crazy because one of them was in 2019, the other in 2022, and this one came out this year. So, it shows that he hasn't been in director's chair too much. And part of the reason is, in an article he was talking about how it's been really hard to greenlit projects. So Considering his track record of Transformers and 2 of his films making over $1 billion at the box office, it makes no sense. It makes perfect sense if he wants to direct another thing. Well, going back to Transformers and considering his track record with only one of his films being a flop, it wouldn't be a bad idea for Paramount to gamble on. And plus, when it comes to this too, while The Last Night was a massive failure, which caused them to course correct and then trying to bring, implement aspects of the Bayverse into the reboot, try to kind of mix the two. The Last Night made around 602 million. Bumblebee movie made a bit of profit. Rise of the Beast, I believe, broke even, and one lost money. So on Paramount's end, bring Bay back is a no-brainer because he's made a lot of money for the studio, and they want to. It's all about money at the end of the day. So and they basically see after Bay, the series kind of went downhill. So they want to bring him back, and it's optics and money wise it makes complete sense. I mean, if I was up at Paramount, I'd bring him back too to see if he can make some more money for the studio. Now, another thing that's really critical about this is that Paramount has the rights to the Transformers films, as you know, which is why no other studio can make Transformers movies outside of Paramount. What's been stated publicly is that agreement expires in 2029 if Paramount does not have a Transformers project in production by then or during that year, which means we will get another Transformers movie either sometime between now and 2029 or in production in 2029. And since Cooley's project seems like I would assume he's been signed on, it's either going to be the first thing I think we're going to see is either Cooley's project or Bay, but Cooley's currently working on a movie, I believe it's called I Eat Poop, some animated movie. So it might be actually Bay's movie that's going to be first. And I feel like that's what they want to do because Transformers, the first live action Transformers movie came out in 2007 and 2027 is coming up 20 years later. And I could totally see them making a movie in like around 3 years from now, 5, 6, 7, or they have to do it in 2 years. I'd really have to start now. So it makes sense, to cash in on that nostalgia. And exactly what that will look like will have to come for another video. Like, are they going to bring Shia back? Are they going to bring Megan Fox back? I mean, who knows? The sky's the limit here on what this project could be. And another thing is what continuity is it going to be in? Is it going to be a sequel to The Last Night? Will it be a Rise of the Beast adjacent film, or will it be something completely different? At this time, we don't know. And I don't think we're going to know for a little bit until we actually hear more news on this. So I'd say definitely keep an eye out for what we could get. And I'm totally hyped for what this could be. I've been, a Bayverse fan growing up. Grew up with these live-action Transformers movies made by Bay. So it's basically, huge childhood nostalgia for me. So seeing the man come back, the man who made my childhood and basically inspired me to make this channel, which has reached almost 300,000 subscribers and over 103 million views. I don't even know how to comprehend that number. It's crazy. So I am all in for it. I'm going to be there day one when this movie comes out. So I'm looking forward to it. So yeah, I'm going to just check my notes real quick to see if we're missing anything else of critical importance. Which, I think that basically covers everything for this video and this installment of the Bayverse Bulletin. So keep keep up with the updates that are going to be coming out. So click that bell, subscribe if you want to hear more production updates. I know this one was more so just a ramble because this is just big news and we don't have anything concrete. But as soon as we start getting set photos, actors getting involved, script leaks, vehicles, of course. Okay, the concept vehicles of these films are always so cool. I'm going to be covering it as soon as I can for you guys. So yeah, this has been Theory Miss with the Bayverse Bulletin, signing out.